Using classic literature as the basis for a video game can be a bit of a risky endeavor, but there are a few examples where some video games turned out pretty alright. I'm looking at Alice Madness Returns, that's a game I really enjoyed. We also recently had Lies of P, which created a masterful reimagining of Pinocchio as a horrific dark fantasy tale, but far too often, things fall a little bit flat. Ebenezer and the Invisible World seeks to create a sequel to Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol in the form of an epic fantasy Metroidvania. How about that one? Will this game invite holiday cheer or jeer? Let's find out. But hey, don't get a lump of coal in your stocking. Head on over to patreon.com/idreamofindiegames to gain Discord access, exclusive live streams, early ad-free shows, and so much more. Your new indie gaming community is waiting. Alright then, you're probably wondering what the hell this game is. So then, Ebenezer and the Invisible World. It's developed by Orbit Studio and published by Play on Worlds. The game opens up with Ebenezer Scrooge receiving, of course, a visit from a ghost, and this ghost was actually a friend of his in the past, and the conversation eventually leads to discussions about an old business owner who had also been visited by ghosts. Ultimately, long story short, he ends up doubling down on his unethical business practices and continues with a goal to create a form of technology that will replace the need for a labor force and leave the workers of London potentially in a really bad situation. Basically, everyone's gonna end up unemployed. That sucks. Because this business owner has great influence and power, his private security force also has great authority in London, more so in fact than the police force, and so his goons attack and oppress the protesting workers of the city. Scrooge accepts the mission to save London's workers by challenging this oppressive power and seeking to change the heart of the man behind this, or to stop him by other means. He shall do whatever is necessary. Ebenezer will be aided by many ghosts throughout the game, some of which will give him gifts and other rewards for quests, and then there's others that will provide him with attacks. Using attacks from your ghost allies will consume some spirit points, but those ghosts that aid you in movement or travel will not cost you anything. As you gain new ghost allies, you could almost look at it like an ability upgrade. On top of that, there are also items called heirlooms which you can equip. While there are a large number of these heirlooms, only a few can be equipped at a time, so you'll have to carefully pick and choose which ones you want to use and when. While the game does not feature an experience system, there's still direct stat upgrading, which is done by locating NPCs, and these NPCs will raise your maximum health or spirit points in exchange for certain items associated with upgrades. These can be found in chests or through drops from enemies, so defeating enemies to farm for upgrade item drops can be approached in a similar way to grinding in games with an experience system. Certain heirlooms can also boost stats, and some of them are also available for purchase, though there are a few that will require upgrade items in addition to money in order to obtain from a seller. Ebenezer's attack can also be increased through the use of different weapons. There are both physical and spirit weapons available, and some enemies can only be damaged with those spirit weapons. Fortunately, the use of spirit weapons does not consume spirit points. However, most of your money will be spent on food, restorative health, that kind of thing, because the game is pretty much impossible otherwise. The extreme difficulty has a lot to do with the abundance of environmental hazards, which are really difficult to avoid because the controls are so poor. Yeah, that's right, it's not so much the enemies that I was concerned with, it was the controls. Let me give you one example. There are platforming sections where you have to bounce off of teleporting balloons in order to reach high platforms, and they have spikes or acid waiting below if you fall, and that's a huge amount of HP that you're going to lose. The controls are already very sketchy and inconsistent, where sometimes you'll experience input lag, or you might have to press a button multiple times to perform the desired action, and then the balloon bouncing mechanics are horrible. Even if you know what you're supposed to do, it'll still be a matter of trial and error to get through the sections, because pressing certain buttons at the same time or hitting a balloon on the same spot won't always have the same effect. This all leads to what is the biggest flaw of the game, the unbalanced and inconsistent mechanics. If there's one word that sums up this title well, it's unbalanced. Combat in the game seems to alternate between two extremes with no middle ground. It's either so easy that there's no challenge to it, or it's cheaply difficult in a very annoying way. For example, the bosses in the game are a joke because you can just stand in front of them, hitting them, and win because they don't really do anything. They can't damage you, they're worthless. However, it's no problem to get one-shotted by a regular enemy if it happens to come out of nowhere and ambush you, and then you won't be able to avoid it due to the input lag or lack of response in those controls. When an enemy hits you like that, you'll get stun locked and will have to continue to be hit repeatedly until you're dead. I don't mean to be a Scrooge here, but come on. Onto the music then. It is competent, but you will be hearing the same tracks over and over again, and it all gets a little bit repetitive and generic after a while. And unlike the music, the sound effects are just completely atrocious, and they'll really grate away at your sanity after hearing them for extended periods of time. Do you remember that scene in Dumb and Dumber where Lloyd Christmas recreates the most annoying sound in the world? Well, Lloyd would have had a new sound to create if he played this game. The obnoxious sound that these flying ghost heads in the observatory area make repeatedly because they never shut up has got to be the single worst sound I've heard in a video game. I was playing the game while wearing headphones, and I eventually had to take them off because the sound was making my skin crawl. As with most things with Ebenezer and the Invisible World, the look of the game is unbalanced and very inconsistent. The visuals are done in a style influenced by more recent Western animation, and while some of the designs look charming, some of them are very sloppy, and overall the game has a look that feels really cheap, almost like a mobile game. Some character animations have a decent look to them, while others are very stiff and awkward. The enemy designs are really lame, and they're the weakest looking part of the game all told. Slowdown sometimes occurs with certain actions, and characters can look really fuzzy when taking damage. The premise of the story is also really difficult to take seriously. While Scrooge attempting to do good after having a change of heart works as part of the plot, the part about a wealthy capitalist being a hero for the working class is just something that doesn't seem plausible even in a fantasy setting and comes across as pure humbug in my opinion. The way this is portrayed is also very awkward. Scrooge doesn't use any of his own wealth or material assets to help the workers. His entire effort is in getting this one person to change his ways. Even if he succeeds, the workers will still be in a fragile position. Why couldn't Scrooge use his fortune to help the workers have their own business where they can run the place and don't have to worry about losing their jobs? In his role as the supposed working class champion, Ebenezer Scrooge also employs the ghosts of children to work for him. There are even characters called spirit children in the game who act similar to the familiars in the Castlevania games and are given to Ebenezer by ghosts for him to use. Nothing says being a hero for the people like exploiting child labor and engaging in child trafficking. As a reviewer, I try to point out the positive in games even when I am also critical of certain aspects of a game because I want people to get a sense of what it is in its totality. Even those with flaws can still have enough upsides that they can be fun and worth playing. However, there aren't enough positives to mention here because even the aspects that are partially positive are also really negative because of how inconsistent everything is. The only real positive thing I can think of is that it's a nice change of pace to see a game with an elderly protagonist because that's just not all that common. However, it still isn't a good example of that theme because the game is so borderline broken it makes for very poor representation. I can't really suggest that any gamer pay for Ebenezer and the Invisible World in the state that it's currently in. It just seems like a game that needs quite a few more years of development to be playable, and as it stands, it isn't even really worth playing for free. While games can have technical issues at launch and become classics after they're patched, this isn't such a case because it has so many problems that it would have to be largely remade to correct the issues. We're talking about making the whole game again. The frustration of trying to progress when most of the mechanics can't even be dependent on the function made playing this a painful experience, and it was honestly one of the worst experiences with a game I've ever had. As someone who has been gaming since 1985, that's saying a lot because I've encountered a ton of shit over the years. It's so bad that I can't even recommend people picking it up just to laugh at it with friends. Because of this, I feel it's necessary to give Ebenezer and the Invisible World an indie Krampus. Is it possible somebody out there might actually enjoy this game? I guess so, if they're into sucking goat balls, if they think that's a good idea. Though gamers of all tastes and temperaments should avoid this one to avoid wasting their time and destroying their sanity.